in their respective liaisons can communicate with each other through code. So, there are just so many of these nuggets from our history, from mythology. I was able to find material in all of these. Agniban also has a big element of science. So, a lot about superconductivity and electronic warfare. Once again, I talked to, certain professors who've been researching this subject. Again, a lot of material is available. In fact, for Calcutta, which talks about a bioweapon and about pandemics, it was written, many years before. 2018 is when it was published, much before the unfortunate events of the last 2 years. So again, I read a fair number of, books and, online literature, papers about pandemics and about, weapons of mass destruction. In fact, at some point, I was worried that if somebody actually just goes through my internet log, they'll sort of wonder what I'm up to. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. So, sir, your works focus on the question or juxtaposition of science or spirituality or logic versus faith, which many a times offer a fresh perspective. So, what inspired you to come up with this novel idea?
So I think this is a fundamental existential question that we all face. We've been brought up with many beliefs, some of them religious, some of them spiritual. There is, in a way, a code of conduct. There's a lot of discussions about ethics and morals. There's also some of us who, over the years have realized that there may be a personal passion or a quest of sorts, trying to find oneself, if you can call it that. So that's on one side. And then on the other side, there's the seemingly harsh, cold world of science. We are just molecules and atoms. We are just, we are just insignificant species in this vast universe. Nobody gives a damn if we live or die. Nobody gives a damn if the whole planet is destroyed. Everything is logical, left brain, cut and right. There's no space seemingly for, softer things and for, what's the role of things like love and faith and belief in a harsh, cold world of this sort. I think many of us may not think about this formally, but in our lives, there is this intertwining of things. You think of doing something which goes against the code of conduct that you've been taught, and you're like, yeah, the whole world is, shit happens anyway, let's just do it. On the other hand, you sometimes see people acting out of passion. There is seemingly no logical reason to start a company. The odds of a startup surviving are something like 1 in 100, or maybe more, maybe even less, and yet people do it, and many of them succeed as well. So what do these things represent? I think for me, it's been one of the primary quests in my life, and I was happy to have discovered, the works of many Eastern philosophers. In fact, going back right up to my college days, I read some of the commentaries on the Upanishads. I read the works of Sri Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda, and I was fortunate to get introduced to mindfulness meditation as well. And actually, the more you read, the more you realize that actually science and philosophy and mysticism are actually very close. In fact, I would say they converge. If you read or listen to, scientists who are at the cutting edge of their work is actually very close to mysticism. That there is that same passion, that same lack of certainty. We think that the world is deterministic. But scientists who are at the cutting edge, quantum physicists and so on, they work with a very indeterminate, very uncertain, very chaotic world. And yet somewhere there seems to be something comprehensible behind it all, like what Albert Einstein said, right? The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. That's so bizarre. How do things have beautiful formulae? It's almost like a work of art. So actually faith and science meet. And so in some of my books, I've sought to bring that as well. So Agniban is about an ancient artifact, and it starts in a remote temple in Egypt, and a warrior who's on a quest to protect that artifact because there's something mystical about it. That's the ancient part of the story. And then there's a modern story, which is, governments and geopolitics and warfare and electronic warfare. And, there's no fantasy element in the book. It's fully, all of these things are real and can happen. And yet, what is the link between this supposed ancient mystical object and this modern world of geopolitics and logic? I think that's what I've tried to bring out.
Indeed, a novel idea, sir. So, in your works, you seamlessly combine ancient Egyptian and Hindu mythology with modern science and politics. And you also have this nuanced approach to philosophy. And your works also have this immense attention to detail. So, how you manage to combine all these?
So, this is another interesting thing. Initially, when I started writing, I used to be bogged down, I think, because I used too much of what people call the left brain. In most of our, the world as it exists today, there is a strong pressure to be rational. You say in a board meeting or in an investment committee meeting, and I used to sort of attend a lot of those, you can't be seen as saying something illogical or irrational. You can't come up with an idea which has not got like a backing or a IRR calculation or something like that. I think most of you in law will encounter the same thing. And yet there is actually in life, if you open the doors to intuition, which is not always logical, if you open the doors to intuition, life becomes that much more magical. As one of the characters says in Agniban, sometimes it helps to let a little magic into your life. So when I initially started off, I was bogged down with the left brain logical way of seeing things. Now, the truth is, if you sit down with logic and try to have a story which combines ancient Egypt and superconductors and electronic warfare and ancient artifacts and code breaking, and it's just too much for the left brain to handle. That's when, as I started writing over time, I learned to let go of this illusion of control. It's important for any artist actually to be able to do that. You shouldn't try to control your creation. You should let go. And what happens when you let go is your subconscious mind starts working. And your subconscious mind, I think it's been now shown that most of us use a fraction of our brains. The subconscious mind has this amazing ability to join the dots. We just need to get out of the way and let the subconscious mind unleash its power. So, the answer to your question is my subconscious mind is the one that was able to join all these dots. And it's amazing. It's not just in art or in writing. I've been in the stock markets for 20 plus years. Even in the stock markets, for 15 years, frankly, I did the logical stuff. I was with, whatever, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan. You do the logical thing. You analyze a company or a stock in a certain way, parameters, metrics, variables, correlations, blah, blah, blah. And then once you cross that, once you transcend that, that's the realm of things like temperament, aptitude, patterns. You're able to see things which are beyond what the logic will show you, even in the stock markets. And that's when you begin to have real power, real understanding of the way things work. So this principle of letting the subconscious mind do its work applies to all areas of life.
So, I often feel that, and I'm quite sure many from the audience feel so, that storytellers have this special secret formula to grab readers' attention and move smoothly through the timeline. So, how you guys, as in you and other authors and other storytellers, manage this? And if you consider your works are set in different timelines. So, how you manage to grab readers' attention?
About how they craft and how how the art manifests itself. So some people are plotters, which means that they will sit and write the outline of the story first. A lot of authors do this so that you have the flow of the story fully figured out. And then, you like a writing assignment, you would write each chapter. That's one way to do it. Another way is, people who are known as pantsers, you just go with the flow. You just go whichever way the characters take you. So my first book actually was written in the latter way, Calcutta. I wrote it in flights, I wrote it in airport lounges. I would see something and get inspired and just write. I was traveling in Vietnam. I saw some caves where the Vietnamese soldiers during the 1970s war used to hide. And that cave inspired me to write something. I was traveling in Gujarat and chanced upon an Indus Valley site called Lothal, and that gave rise to certain ideas in my mind. I wrote those. Uh, the problem is that after writing 100,000 words, I realized it just wasn't coming together, and I had to junk something like 70 or 80,000 words. So that's a problem if you just go with the flow, because you lose control, and then you may just realize a lot of work has gone waste. The second book, Agniban, was more civilized and I must say less stressful, frankly, because I wrote out the outline. There's still a lot of changes that you do to it, but at least the outline was written, and then I proceeded to sort of fill it up. So there is no single formula, frankly. In order to hold readers' attention, I think some people will say, hey, if it's a thriller, yeah, I think one thing you can say, I think nowadays readers' attention spans are very low. In fact, I saw some study that from the time the iPhone, came, which was around mid 2000s, our attention spans have gone down. And I don't know if this is true or it's one of those WhatsApp inventions, but I believe it's like equal to a goldfish or something now. So holding readers' attention is not easy. There was a time when you would hear authors say that the end of every chapter should leave a cliffhanger so that you feel compelled to turn to the next page. I think now, frankly, every sentence needs to have that tension in it. Otherwise, readers will just put the book down. But the truth is that each book is different. Some books may want to cater to a certain type of reader who wants to ponder over something and has all the time in the world to read and bask in the glory of the scene that you've created. So there is no single formula there. I think each author, each book is different. Even for me, my first two books are thrillers which combine conspiracy with history and mythology. My third book is actually going to be a thriller on the stock markets, and I have a couple of non-fiction books in my mind. Hopefully, I'll write them after that. So, each writer, each book, different. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what makes a good story?
Well, I would say 3-4 things. I would say, A, has it kept the reader engaged or not? Engaged in whatever form, your objective, and does it make the reader? Does it take the reader to a world that the author has created or not? And does it make the reader be a part of that story? So a story is not a one-way communication where the author just tells some stuff to the reader. Real stories are those where the reader thinks and sort of participates in that world. So in a way, you are a part of the story because you're bringing in something about yourself. You are your unique interpretation of things, for instance. So that is important. Are readers engaged or not? That's very important, especially as I said today, with low attention spans, etc. And then, frankly, after that, it depends on individual authors and individual genres. Are you, if it's a book about Indian history or mythology combined with a modern day story, then the question is, are you reinterpreting your own heritage? Are you able to make the reader ponder about our own heritage? Those sorts of things come in. So that part would be different from genre to genre.
So one of the few challenges that budding authors face is regarding publication, as most of the reputed and established houses often don't publish work of new authors. So any tips which you have is publication hiccup, which many new authors or aspiring authors might face?
Sure, yeah, and this is a genuine issue. Internationally, publishers accept submissions only through agents. In India, most publishers accept direct submissions. Few things here. A, if possible, if you can somehow find a personal way to reach out to anybody who is connected to the publishing house or any author who's been published by the publishing house, etc., it would probably help, because you probably will get maybe a hearing sooner, rather than yours just being one number which has gone into the pile. It helps if you have some recall value. If you're writing a mail or calling them, try and see if you can stand out in the few sentences that you write. Uh, Other thing is, keep trying, be patient. I think you would have heard this n number of times. Most successful authors have been rejected multiple times by multiple publishing houses. So don't give up hope. This is a long journey. Often it can be a lonely one, because you don't get any external validation. You don't know till your book gets published whether you're even a good writer or not. So it requires a lot of courage. And just don't give up hope. Keep trying. Also, nowadays, I think, there is this alternate option available to a lot of people. If for some reason you realize you've been doing the rounds of these publishers for years and nothing's happened, first, genuinely see if you can incorporate any feedback that they might have given when they said no to your manuscript. B, see if you can enlist a good editor to edit your work. And C, then, don't hesitate to self-publish. And self-publishing has, the whole internet and online revolution in a lot of authors. So you can do your own promotion online. You can build your own social media community of sorts. You can, participate in, various online forums and so on. So there's no reason that you can't, self-publish and still potentially be a success. It's more difficult than conventional publishing, but nothing stops you from doing it. But yeah, don't give up. That's important. It's a long, lonely journey, but it's all worth it at the end when you see your book in print and when readers read it and tell you that they've enjoyed the book.
Sure, sir. So most authors read a lot. So, sir, it would be great if you could share your favorite books or books which you would like us to read.
Sure. So, about my reading journey, actually. So I started off, as I said, my grandfather had a whole library at his house, and, I got interested first through reading some of the classics. And within the classics, I was attracted more to classics which involved some element of travel, Coral Island, Treasure Island, Moby Dick, etc., etc. So those books would fascinate me more. But and then over the years, when I was in college, as I said, I was fortunate to read a lot of books about our own ancient philosophy, and even some other books. Like, there is this ancient Taoist text called Tao Te Ching, which is fascinating. And then over the years, various other books on philosophy, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, some of the works of Aldous Huxley, William Golding, Lord of the Flies, Brave New World, George Orwell's Animal Farm, I thought was a classic. So all these books, in a way, take you to the edges of reality, the edges of what is possible. And then, of course, thrillers have been a favorite for me for a long time, from, school days when I started reading Alistair MacLean, and then Robert Ludlum, and then Frederick Forsyth, and then, of course, more recently, the usual thriller writers, Baldacci, Daniel Silva, and James Patterson, and so on. John le Carre used to be my favorite during my college days. So yeah, so I would say my taste in books is quite eclectic. It ranges from, commercial thrillers to books about philosophy to some of the classics, you can say. But yeah, these are some of the books that made an impact on me.
So, sir, we would also like to know about your future projects, books, any upcoming movies based on your books.
Sure, thanks. So I am working on a thriller which is set in the stock markets, and I spent many years in that world. It's a dynamic world, lots of adrenaline, lots of excitement. I think some of you who will be into corporate law will probably end up seeing parts of the world, especially investment banking deals and so on. I also have, as I said, mindfulness was a big part of my journey. I think just being aware, I practice meditation every day. That enabled me to get in touch with my creative side and unlock my creativity. So I will be writing a book about that as well. My first book, Calcutta, has been optioned for screen adaptation. Of course, these projects take time, so that will take its own course. And yeah, I have potentially a fantasy series I have in mind as well. So yeah, I think I've got my plate full for the next 7-8 years at least.
So, sir, any piece of advice for budding or aspiring writers and storytellers?
Sure. And I'm saying this conscious that all of you are training to be lawyers or judges, and therefore will potentially have very busy professional lives. So a few things. The rewards for just unlocking your creativity, for following your passion, are immense. They can't be quantified in numbers or in money terms. I think the reward, in a way, is for your soul. And it may seem, in today's world of very conscious, logical stuff, it may seem like, "Arey, yaar, soul reward kya hota hai?" But it's a very gratifying journey. So I would encourage you to not forget your passion in the middle of all the hustle bustle, and you very soon you will be in the world of deadlines and bosses and promotions and everything. Don't forget your creative side. Also, if you can, try and see, if possible, every day, but at least a few times a week, allot a little bit of time. It could be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour to begin with, but allot some time for your creative work. That really helped me. I used to first write only when inspiration struck me. Don't wait for inspiration. That's not how creativity works. Inspiration comes to those who've put in the work. And what is the work that you're supposed to put in? It's that half an hour that you spend in front of a laptop trying to write. So don't let go of that. Once you start doing that, the subconscious mind starts connecting the dots, and you'll start getting ideas. The other thing is, don't worry about how your work will turn out. I think this fear of failure, fear of how your work will be perceived, fear of whether your work will turn out good or not, that stops a lot of good, really good potential writers. So don't worry till the time you finish your first draft, you don't need to think about how your writing looks or feels at all. It's only after your first draft that you can open it up to feedback and editing and all that, because creativity gets impeded if you judge yourself. And so don't judge yourself. Even if the first few lines that you write look like complete, absolute crap, it's perfectly fine. It's your crap. Nobody else needs to see it. After you write your first draft is when you can then open it up for feedback from friends, etc., etc. So this is, in my opinion, a very important thing. I know so many people who could potentially write very well, but there's a friend of mine who says, "Yeah, this is not sounding like Joseph Conrad." It won't, because you're not Joseph Conrad. You're somebody else. And I'm sure most of these guys, the famous writers, they all started off, a certain way, and then over the years they evolved and became better and better. So yeah, please don't give up. Give some time for your creativity. Don't judge yourself harshly. It's Don't expect perfection at first glance. Those are the things I would say.
So, as you mentioned that the author himself or herself doesn't know how his or her work is until it gets published. So, after getting your work published, do you read your book reviews? And how do you handle good or bad ones?
So I read the first few book reviews, because you really don't know. It's like, as somebody said, it's like you're basically just you're just naked, and you just have no idea how it's going to turn out. So initially, when your book is published, yes, so the first few weeks I read the reviews, because I'm really curious to know how people have liked it. After a few weeks, though, I don't I don't keep track of it on a daily basis. Maybe the frequency slowly starts, like a curve, petering off over time. But the first few weeks, absolutely, every single word of the reviews are important. And if you have the right attitude, some of the reviews, even if they're negative ones, you can learn from them for future books. But of course, it's an unparalleled feeling if somebody says, and especially when readers get the small things in your book, that's really fascinating. Yeah.
So I've got this question on WhatsApp that, according to you, what was your hardest scene to write?
Well, I can think of many. I don't know about hardest or not, but there are some scenes which were very profound for me. So, there is this one scene. I think I told you that this book involves a warrior from Egypt, ancient Egypt, actually, who's somehow, all the people who are protecting this very mystical artifact have all been killed. and only he and his fiancée are left. And he has to, as per a prophecy, he has to take this artifact, this mysterious artifact, all the way to India. And this is 1500 years ago. And he has to say goodbye to his fiancée, who alone has to fight, the people who are after the artifact. And it's almost certain that she will die. That parting scene for me was quite interesting to write. In fact, it reminded me of one of those Muhammad Rafi songs. I think it goes Abhi na jao chhodkar, and he says ki, something to the effect that if I don't leave now, I'll never be able to leave. And somehow that scene was playing in my mind when I wrote this scene. Yeah, so many such scenes. Another one in Agniban was towards the end, when there is this, big, almost like a pralay, where the waves of the sea in the Sundarbans are lashing against the land. There's a big flood. There's a big cyclone. A whole island is going to be swallowed, and in some ways, this mirrors climate change. Because that is potentially what can happen if our whole planet is ravaged by climate change. Sea levels rising, almost like an apocalypse. To bring alive that scenario of the apocalypse, I think that was quite difficult to write, because I just wanted to make sure that people feel the horror of what it is to see those large waves rising.
So there is this recent trend that many authors and many novels based on this histro-mythical genre are coming up. So where do you see it going?
I think a lot of this is because, India as a nation, we've gone through these various phases, right? I think we now have a generation in India which is unburdened by the colonial legacy, and so this generation wants to figure out its own interpretation of our history and mythology. It wants to rediscover, our history and mythology. And so, dry academic books are not necessarily the way to do that. A story, albeit with elements of fiction in it, is much more fascinating, much more interesting. So I see this trend potentially continuing, as because our mythology is so vast and so rich, and history as well, that there are, there's just infinite stories there.
So we have got this very curious question on WhatsApp that do you Google yourself?
I don't Google myself, but I Google my books, yes, to see if there are any new reviews which have cropped up. Yeah, especially in the initial stages after a book is released, I'm just curious to see if what people have written about it. Yeah.
So there is another question that, seeing this trend of renewed interest in ancient mytho genre, what are the genres that you believe that will further boom in future?
Yeah, I think the whole history, mythology part certainly is one. I think a lot of nonfiction, it's already booming, because people look for anchor nowadays. It's just, there's just so many pressures and so many variables in life that people want. So it's not just self-help, but self-discovery. That whole area is one. I just think also that thrillers, internationally, thrillers are the largest selling section of the market. We still don't have as many good quality thrillers in India, but in the last few years that has changed. So I think that segment will boom as well.
So another question is that from Mr. Pranav Gandhi, he's asking that does your family support initially when you started writing?
Yes. So in fact, my wife is a musician. So, so in a way, my own journey of unlocking my own creativity, finding my own creative voice was, sort of, I took a lot of cues from her, frankly. So yes, my family has been pretty supportive. Just one thing here for any of those among you who are keen to write. Initially, please don't leave your day jobs. Writing as a profession is a tough one from a monetary perspective, as many writers I'm sure would have told you. So it's your passion, but make time for it in the middle of your other professional engagements, till the time that you establish yourself as an author. In my case, I still, my corporate pursuits still keep me quite busy. So I sort of balance time between that and my writing.
Okay, sir. And we have this question from uh, Miss Mahi Agarwal. She's asking, what are some traps for aspiring writers which they should avoid?
Mahi, that's a very good question. There are a lot of traps. There are a lot of traps. I think the first one is don't give up, because it's a lonely journey, because it's very little validation. Unlike a lot of other areas where, you do well at work, your coworkers will tell you, your boss will tell you. If you're running a startup, it's more difficult, but when you get your first customer, it's an aha moment. When your product is developed, it's an aha moment. In law, I don't know, in litigation, if you win a case, that's an aha moment. You close a deal, corporate law, that's an aha moment. In writing a book, it's very solitary till the time your book gets accepted for publication. So don't give up. That's, I would say, one of the traps. Another traps during the writing process is to be too harsh on yourself, judge your work too harshly, expect perfection. Please don't expect perfection. It's perfectly fine if the work, is shoddy to begin with. So don't fall for that trap as well. Third is, think about when you want to show your work to your friends. Don't be in a hurry to do that, because in the initial stages, as Swami Vivekananda said, a hedge, a sapling needs to have a hedge around it. It needs to be protected. And when it becomes stronger, then it's okay to, unleash it on the world. So sometimes feedback from friends can be a little demotivating, especially in the early stages. So take feedback only when you're ready to take it. Don't be in a hurry to do that. And don't give up. Yeah.
There is another question, sir. Do you think that someone could be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
So this is an interesting one. Actually, all of us, and I'm sure, psychologists would probably concur with this. All of us feel emotion somewhere. It's just that some of us may have buried them under various layers due to various reasons. Sometimes early childhood experiences make you feel that if you make yourself vulnerable and display your emotions, somewhere you'll be taken advantage of, or it'll not be received properly, or you're yourself afraid of what might happen if you actually, unleash your true emotions. You may be afraid of your own power, as Nelson Mandela said. Sometimes we are afraid of our own power. So there is nobody who, in my opinion, doesn't feel emotion. If somebody says they don't feel emotion, it probably means they've buried it. So actually, writing can be therapeutic for precisely those sorts of people. Because sometimes, so if that person is feeling the urge to write, even if the person doesn't feel emotion, please write. Because writing may be your way of bringing those emotions to light in a setting that seems to be somewhat safe. So, yeah. So, as long as you have the urge to write, please write. If you don't have the urge to write, don't. It's as simple as that. Nothing to do with your emotions. You will discover your emotions along the way.
We have one more question which says that, are your character based on some real person or are they inspired from some real people?
Yes, frankly, they're not based on a single person, but they are based on an amalgamation of many different things that you see around you. So the first book, Agniban, for instance, one of the characters is this guy who works with an investment bank. He's passionate about trekking and mountaineering. He doesn't fully enjoy his job. He's still unfulfilled. He feels that there's something larger that he's destined to do. So some of that you can see was my own, experience to some extent. Then there is this professor who lives in his own head. He's brilliant, but he's also, very eccentric, and he's a recluse of sorts. He, is in his own mind, but he's got these fascinating ideas, and he's on the cusp of the discovery of a century. So this, again, based on certain people that I've seen, especially some of my friends who are scientists, they very closely resemble this person. And then there's this woman called Damini, who is a secret agent, and she's from childhood been a rebel. She's been, people have tried to box her into, with patriarchal, rules and so on. But somewhere she's always rebelled. But along with that rebellion, society infuses a sense of guilt, So there is this guilt on one side and, this rebellious nature on the other side. So she's constantly in doubt whether, she's a secret agent. She has to kill people potentially, right? And so she's doing it for the larger good, but she still has she's racked by a lot of guilt. So I actually don't know any secret agents who've killed people, but I do know a lot of women who, in the process of pursuing their careers or making a name for themselves, have had to take decisions which leave them with a sense of guilt and so on. So all these characters are an amalgamation of people that I've seen in real life, but no one person.
We have another question which says that what does literary success look like to you?
Well, to me, I think the first thing is, have I been the first sort of marker for literary success for me is, in this book, have I been able to do what I set out to do? If there is a certain effect I wanted to have on the reader, which is either make the reader think or just make the reader sit back and enjoy it or make the reader feel the suspense or whatever it is, have I been able to achieve that? That's my first thing. So that's at the time that I finish writing the book, and hopefully I'll get to know about it when readers read it. Uh, I think the second part, which is frankly more external, is, over time, do your books reach a larger number of people? Do a larger number of people relate to some of the things that you've talked about? Has that spurred debate in their minds? Those sorts of things. Yeah, for me, it's that. It's not a very externally driven definition of success.
Do you see a connection between the high ambition that we see in India as a country and the development of different literary genres?
Well, the our literature is a reflection of our society, just as films are. So if we see a lot of ambition, and we do, right, with everything from Shark Tank to Indian Idol, we see that ambition. It'll reflect in books as well. It'll reflect in books as well, and so yes, we'll see it in literature, and so we'll see more stories being written about these people who are ambitious, about what they've done, about their travails, and so on.
There is one more question. What are the ethics of writing about history and historical figures when you write about uh, something that is, I guess, what the person is trying to ask is that what are the ethics of writing about someone who is from ancient times?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I think when you're writing about people from history, which is, say, in the last 200-300 years, it's a bit simpler. You can't. Maybe it's the same even for ancient figures, actually. First, I think you can't. I feel, this is my personal feeling. There's nothing in the law stopping you from doing that, I guess. But my personal feeling is, it's important not to distort, at least based on available literature, available nonfiction. Uh, you should not distort what seems to be the broad message in life of that person. So, you can't. So if a person is, for instance, non-violent, or if the person is, been very benevolent, it would be morally wrong, I feel, to show this person as a dictator or something like that. Uh, the question then is that, how do you even write fiction which draws from history or mythology? How do you even do that if you can't take some liberties? So at least what I do is, there are periods in these people's lives, especially ancient figures, which are left, which have gaps, and sometimes you can fill these gaps with very intriguing things which are roughly in keeping with those figures' broad personalities. So if, for instance, I mean, with no, this is just off the top of my head, if Chandragupta Maurya was this, valorous, chivalrous, brave warrior, are there periods in his life when, where there are gaps, when it's unclear what he did? So in that period, what actually happened to him? So maybe something happened to him which made him tap into his bravery. That would be an okay book to write. But what would not be an okay book to write is to show him as a coward and nothing more. That would be wrong, because it goes against whatever one reads about him. So that's the way I look at ethics, but it's very personal. It's very personal.
There is one more question which says that, sir, how or what would be your suggestion for an aspiring author who wants to design his own cover page?
I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. If you're being published by a publisher, you can tell them that, hey, this is the design that I want, and then it's a process. The publisher has to be okay with your design. If not, they maybe ask for some changes and so on. If it's self-published, then nobody stops you from doing what you want with your cover. And I do know of a few people who've designed their own covers, and I think for many of them, it's an expression of the same creative. Um, it's an expression, just the way that the story is an expression. The cover is also an expression of what they want to convey. So it's great if you want to design your own cover. I mean, you might want to have a discussion on that with the publisher at the time that you're signing up with them. If it's self-published, then great, nobody stops you.
Which character from your own work would you most relate to?
All of them, all of them, all of the characters. It's like, asking somebody who among your children do you most relate to. So all of them. So I talked to you about Samir, the investment banker, who is not very happy with that and loves trekking in the mountains. Damini, the secret agent, who's rebellious, has a don't care attitude, but daredevil, but still racked by guilt. Bani is this eccentric professor who lives in his own mind. In the second book as well, Dhruv is this very competent and brave commando, but he hides a secret, and something that has happened in his past troubles him a lot. So all of these characters I can relate to. I mean, if I was to choose one, I would say Bani and Damini from the first book, the eccentric historian and the rebellious secret agent. Yeah.
So I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you so much, sir, for coming here and giving us the privilege of hosting you and shedding light on the intricacies of writing, publishing, and researching novels and stories. And I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. And I hope that our audience also enjoyed this. And also, those who haven't read sir's book, do check out on Amazon and your nearest bookstores. And sir, we hope to host you for our future events.
Thank you so much, Harsh. This has been a wonderful session. I'm so happy that the audience asked a lot of questions. I hope it was useful for you as well. But for me, it's been fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.